Hi everybody, Malcolm here, just to explain about a new podcast series I've begun today. It's part of what I call Quiet Time Coaching, but it's a new series on the Psalms of Ascent, and it's going to be daily whilst we navigate through this COVID-19 virus challenge. I thought it might be helpful for us to focus on the Psalms of Ascent as a way to help our hearts and our minds be in the right place, in a healthy place, even whilst the COVID-19 virus is doing its worst for us physically. Hearts and minds are ultimately more important even than our bodies and those we love. Those are the people we love. Colossians chapter 3 is the idea. Since then, you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. And so we're going to focus our hearts and minds in the right place. And I think the Psalms of Ascent are the best way to do this. They're a brilliant set of Psalms. They go from 120 to 134. 15 Psalms, and I've explained why they are significant in the first edition of the podcast, but I'll just mention it again here. The Psalms of Ascent start from Psalm 120 as the pilgrims come to Jerusalem for a feast, and they would have entered into this area, or close to this area, as they finished those Psalms of Ascent and arrived in Jerusalem. Psalm 134, a Psalm of Ascent. Behold, bless the Lord, all you servants of the Lord, who by night stand in the house of the Lord. Lift up your hands in the sanctuary and bless the Lord. The Lord who made heaven and earth bless you from Zion. And Amen. That they were used by the Israelites as they were going up from wherever they lived to Jerusalem 3 times a year for major festivals. And so they would travel with their family, perhaps with a whole village. They'd travel together from wherever they lived, walking together, eating together, camping overnight together, and singing these psalms as they went. So they would know these psalms by heart. And they were a journey from where they were to where they prefer to be, in a sense, with God on the mountain of the Lord. And they were psalms of ascent, as in ascending, in literal terms and in metaphorical terms. They were literal because Jerusalem was was the highest city on a mountain. It was the highest city in Israel. So wherever you were traveling from, your village, your town, you were going up to Jerusalem, to the temple, but also metaphorically, because you're traveling in a sense from your ordinary life to the Holy of Holies in the temple. So you're coming from distance from God to closeness with God. And that's not, again, literal, it's metaphorical. But I think it might help us to think that way now. That we're traveling from our place of despair to a place of hope. We're traveling from confusion to a place of peace. We're traveling from pain to a place of joy. And these daily podcasts are aimed to be a help to our devotional lives. So they're meant to be like a starter for prayer to help us to have our hearts and minds with Jesus in the place of true reality, because what is really real is God. And we have to deal with the material around us now, but none of this lasts forever. And so it's worth considering the fact that, or considering how we can place our hearts and minds with the reality that is God whilst we deal with the temporary reality that's around us. How do we handle it? How do we remain compassionate? How do we remain hopeful? How do we remain people of a pure heart and spirit towards people whilst we deal with all of our challenges? And ultimately, how do we not give in to the anxiety that is very natural and very much around us with people and in the media? How do we deal with the realities of the challenges we have, but don't succumb to an unhealthy anxiety? And I believe the Psalms of Ascent will help us. So I'd like to encourage us to listen to the podcasts. I'm going to be posting them on my own podcast feed, on my own website, my Facebook page, and the Quiet Time Coaching Facebook page, if you want to look for those. Where possible, I will cross-post them to the Thames Valley and Watford Church Facebook pages, but I'm not going to post them on the websites for Watford or Thames Valley or anywhere else, because cross-posting or reposting takes an awful lot of time, and it's going to take quite a bit of time to put these together. And I need to use the rest of my time for other things like pastoral issues and taking care of my own family. So I hope you understand that I won't be posting these in the Thames Valley podcast feed or the Watford podcast feed. They'll just remain on my podcast feed. But you can find that. Just search for Malcolm Cox in podcasts or MCCX. You should find it there. Or Quiet Time Coaching might also take you there. If you're looking and you can't find the podcast, let me know and I'll make sure you can find the link. They'll come out like a couple of verses at a time for each psalm. We'll go through each of the psalms from 120 to 134. And if you know anybody else that might benefit from this is primarily aimed for the Watford church members and Thames Valley church members, but I know there'll be a much wider application than that. So please pass on the link to anybody that you know in any congregation or anywhere that might find these thoughts from these tremendous psalms at all helpful. Well, I think that's all I want to share about for the moment. And let's go through the Psalms of Ascent together. I'm going to leave you today with a prayer that I finished the first podcast with. I read this morning, actually, in a book by Dallas Willard. It's from a book called Life Without Lack, Living in the Fullness of Psalm 23, which I am really enjoying, and I'm using that as ideas to prepare a new sermon series on Psalm 23. But here's a psalm, here's a prayer that he has written that comes at the end of one of the chapters. And I think it's really helpful for us to think about this prayer and perhaps even pray it today. So you might like to pray it with me now, or you might like to pray it later. I'll put the text in the show notes. Here's the prayer. Lord, minister to me by your Spirit. Come into my heart and mind and release me from all inward tension and anxiety. Hold before my mind the truth that I have nothing to fear from Satan, for you have defeated him. All I must do is fill my life and my mind with you. Remind me often, especially in the midst of difficulty, that you, who are in me, are greater than he who is in the world. Help me to carry this truth with me as I contemplate the awesome reality of the spiritual battle taking place. A battle that, perhaps in our time, is moving perceptively closer to its climax. Give me the vision of you who are our Father, who art in heaven, the shepherd in whose presence there is no lack, so I may have the confidence and power to love and to live as Jesus lived. In his name, amen. I hope you find that prayer as useful to you as I did this morning when I prayed through it. And I hope you find this podcast series on the Psalms of Ascent helpful and encouraging. I offer these podcasts in the hope that they will glorify God, strengthen your heart in Jesus Christ, and give you the strength you need to not only hold on to God, but then to find the strength to serve others. Until the next time, take care and God bless.